We assess that the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, under President Xi Jinping, will continue efforts over the next year to achieve Xi's vision of making China the preeminent power in East Asia and a major power on the world stage. What is perhaps most concerning is that the CCP is increasingly convinced that it can only fulfill Xi's vision at the expense of U.S. power and influence, and through tools of coercion, using demonstrations of strength, as well as economic and political coercion to compel governments to acquiesce to the CCP's preferences, including the land, sea, and air claims in the region and its assertions of sovereignty over Taiwan. And the relationship between the United States and China has consequently become more challenging. Xi's public reference to America's suppression of China in March of this year reflects his longstanding distrust of U.S. goals and his belief that the United States seeks to contain China. Xi's speech was the most public and direct criticism that we have seen from him to date, and probably reflects growing pessimism in Beijing about China's relationship with the United States, as well as his growing worries about the trajectory of China's domestic economic development and indigenous technology innovation, which he now seeks to blame on the United States. And even as the rhetoric has become more heated, we continue to assess that Beijing wants to preserve stability and avoid triggering additional technology restrictions or sanctions from the United States and our partners as they seek to narrow the gap in their economic and technological competition with us. Perceiving the United States as a threat, the PRC seeks to undercut U.S. influence and is looking to portray the United States as the root of global problems. China seeks to divide us from our allies and partners, frame U.S. actions as provocations that provide a basis for planned PRC aggression, which they then claim are simply responses, such as China's expansion of its military presence surrounding Taiwan, which the PRC asserted was in response to President Tsai's recent transit through the United States, as well as her meetings with two speakers of the House over the past year. And China's leaders are focused on spurring domestic economic growth this year, but in the long run, spurring indigenous technology innovation is paramount. President Xi remains confident that Beijing can innovate its way to the technological frontier, regardless of U.S. and allied restrictions, and that doing so will give China the competitive advantage that is crucial to achieving his vision for China as a world power. Nonetheless, we are likely to see more dissonant messaging and actions coming out of Beijing, such as the recent charm offensive by Premier Li Qiang, welcoming foreign direct investment at the China Development Forum, juxtaposed against Beijing's pressure on foreign firms and executives, including investigations of U.S. firms and a clampdown on previous non-sensitive data flows out of China. And the IC assesses that China's long-term economic growth will continue to decelerate because China's era of rapid catch-up growth is ending, and structural issues such as debt, demographics, inequality, over-reliance on investment, and inadequate domestic consumption remain. And although the CCP may find ways to overcome its structural challenges over the long term, in the short term it continues to take an increasingly aggressive approach to external affairs, often to bolster its domestic agenda. China's leaders are increasing their investment in a world-class military, expanding their country's nuclear arsenal and cyber threat capacity, pursuing counter-space weapons capable of targeting U.S. and allied satellites, forcing foreign companies and coercing foreign countries to allow the transfer of technology and intellectual property in order to boost indigenous capabilities, continuing to increase global supply chain dependencies on China with the possibility of using such dependencies to threaten and cut off foreign countries during a crisis. And the CCP is also seeking to reshape global governance in line with Xi's preferences and governance standards that support the monopoly of power within China and expanding influence operations, including through the export of digital repression technologies. And furthermore, we've observed the expanding strategic ties between China and Russia, as mentioned by the chairman, another critical priority for the IC, which has been strengthened by the conflict in Ukraine. We're now over a year into the war, which is reshaping not only Russia's global relationships and strategic standing, but also our own, strengthening our alliances and partnerships in ways that President Putin almost certainly did not anticipate, often precipitating the very events he hoped to avoid, such as Finland's accession to NATO and Sweden's petition to join, while also increasing Xi's leverage over Putin.